So we oftentimes joint venture with a local land developer, and so sometimes they are within that community. There are some places like Philadelphia and Charleston where we do enough stuff that we do know the community, but in these other places, we try to find a local partner.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us each week when you tune in, you'll hear one of two different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines and we talk about what it means for the land development industry. Then other times, you're going to hear an interview style show where we have on someone associated with the land development industry and we dig into some topics that are of interest to them. Now, today I'm excited to be joined by Stephen Wendell, the co-founder and CEO at Mountain Shore Properties, based out of New York. Thanks for joining me, Stephen.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here today.
Yeah, so I was looking through some of your background and how you got into the real estate industry, and I think it's always interesting to me, and I think to the listeners as well. Just hearing about different people's paths to get into it, because it's not always the same. There's always different paths
No.
to it, and I think yours is a little bit different as well. And so, could you walk us through your path and how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. My father's been in real estate. He was an accountant before I was born, but since I was born, and he opened his first hotel the year I was born. So ever since I've been around on this earth, I've been around someone who's been in the real estate industry, doing all sorts of things: hotels, non-hotels, all sorts of different real estate business deals. So I was born and in and around it, raised in and around it, but then went to college, went to law school, came out of law school during the recession, and was put kind of at a client's place, which was the Philadelphia Eagles, to wait to go to the law firm because they had too many employees, so they were looking for places to put us to save some money for the year. So I worked for the Philadelphia Eagles, which was kind of like a dream job to start with. And while I was in Philadelphia, I had a good bit of time on my hands. The firm's paying me a salary, so the Eagles have me for free. So it was not a difficult job, but it was a great job. And I was walking in and around Philadelphia and kind of saying, "This is an amazing city, but it's got certainly gaps in the road, and there seems like there's some development opportunity to do stuff here." And that just was like a kind of natural instinct to want to do something. And so I got my dad and a few of my college buddies together and did a small real estate deal on South Street in Philly. And that kind of started, what is now 15 years later, a real estate career. I went to that firm for a year and then, quickly was decided that being a partner at a law firm was not going to be for me, and said, let's get out. And then kind of joined forces with my father and one of my good friends from college, Ryan Reich, who's our chief investment officer. And we kind of founded Mountain Shore Properties and gave it a name, and kind of solidified the couple decades of work that my dad had already been doing on kind of a deal by deal basis. And Mountain, for where I'm from in West Virginia, to Shore, South Carolina, where I was raised, was where the name came from. And for the last 15 years, we've been doing non-hotel stuff in cities that we know well, like Charleston, South Carolina, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and then have done multiple hotel deals, independent, boutique, branded, across different states on the East Coast, and have taken his history. He built the 13th Hampton Inn in the country in like 1985, which is a traditional exterior corridor hotel, and we've kind of gone away from those, as the industry has, and built more urban core, secondary, tertiary market hotels, both branded and non-branded. We're tending in the more non-branded space now. So that's a brief synopsis of how I got here and where we are today.
But you mentioned that you've been around the real estate industry back basically since birth. And
Yeah.
and you also mentioned you had you kind of had an instinct as you were walking around, Philly, like looking around and seeing opportunities. Do you think that's something that your dad kind of ingrained in you as you were growing
Yeah,
up?
I think I was very in tune with like the conversations he was having, like whether we were driving to, I played baseball in high school and in college, and whether we were driving to and from a game and he's on a call talking about a deal, I was very kind of tuned in to what was happening. Um, and it was a very natural kind of feeling when I was in Philly to be like, why are there, on South Street specifically, like, why are there so many gaps in the road. I mean, like infill properties that were just vacant. And, 15 years later in Philadelphia, you realize that it's difficult to build here and it's difficult to get stuff done in a city like this. In any of the big MSAs in our country, it's difficult to do stuff. But, that was a natural inclination. And, I very much love the beginning part of either imagining what a building that's already there could be or imagining what the vacant land could be, and where it fits into that community and what we're doing, whether it's a hotel project or not a hotel project. And so we do all types of development, and we're a soup to nuts firm, and we even manage a lot of our assets. But certainly that aspect of the job is the most interesting and fun for me.
We haven't had anybody on the show who has done development of hotels, at least nobody that's brought it up and we've talked about it.
Cool.
What does that look like? Is it a relationship you have to build with the like the hotel chain essentially, and then
Yeah.
you kind of agree to build out certain number of hotels in certain areas that they're planning to expand?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Actually, first of all, it's just not for the faint of heart. It's very difficult, and there's a way more variables when you compare it to building, 40 apartments or an office building. And so we've done all of those. From when a brand is involved, and the way that pretty much all of them work now, they've had different ways to get to the same point. But you're talking about five major brands, and Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, IHG, and Accor. They basically represent most of the food chain. There are some like larger scale bespoke brands like Auberge and Four Seasons that represent and have smaller footprints but do very well. But by and large, you approach them and say, I have a site for a hotel. If you've never done a hotel before, it's very difficult to go to Marriott and say, I have a site for a hotel. They want to see that you've done something before. So usually you start maybe doing something lower down the flagpole, as we call it. And so you go to them and say, I have this site. And if you're already approved, or if you're in that system, okay, I want to do a Hampton Inn in Tallahassee, Florida, next to FSU. I've got this site. You have to have it under control, which means you have a contract to buy it, or you already own it. And then you submit an application to them, and that's a non-refundable fee that has plans and basic schematics and room counts. And so you got to spend some money on the front end before you even submit. Now, usually, if you've done this enough times, you've had enough conversations that you know what's going to be accepted or not, or has a reasonable likelihood of being accepted. And then once you're accepted, you move forward and you pay them a franchise fee along the way once you open. There's various ad hoc fees that you can pay them for supplemental support, but by and large, they have it pretty dialed in, especially with what we call their hard brands, which is like a Hampton Inn or a Marriott Courtyard, something that never changes. What we are focusing more on now are soft brands. So that means that we're creating the brand. It's unique to the area we're creating it, the hotel. There's only 101, but the brand is in the background in the reservation system. So we're essentially using their infrastructure, their pipes to plug into. And in the case of Marriott, you open a hotel and they have 260 million reward customers day one that you have access to, essentially. And so that's extremely powerful, and it's becoming more and more powerful by the week, by the day, by the year, as they grow and have more breadth and more types of hotels. It used to be, it's an interesting point, kind of when the OTAs, which are called online travel agencies like Travelocity and Expedia, came on. That's how hotels were kind of like getting themselves out to consumers. And now the hotel companies actually regret making those deals, and they're actually taking back some of that power because the brands want you to book on their site and never leave anywhere else. And Marriott at this point has so many different options. In my opinion, they have too many options, but they have so many options now that you should be able, as a customer, a Marriott Bonvoy, customer, to go on Marriott.com. You don't need to go to Kayak or anywhere else to search for a hotel. If you're going to Boise or Madison or wherever USA, they should have something to accommodate you. Whether you're looking for something higher end, you're looking to stay for 3 months in an extended stay hotel, or if you're looking for a business trip and need, a down the fairway option and breakfast included, like they have all of these things. And so it's a pretty powerful architecture that they have built, and it's now increasingly asset light. So they're just getting fees, and they are, they don't own a lot of the real estate. They own the system and the franchise, and it's working for them.
So going back to your example of the, you find a site somewhere and you present it to them. So it sounds like the way this works is that you're finding the land, you're doing the development, assuming that it's accepted, and
Yep.
then if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like you or maybe you hire somebody to manage, but you're actually managing the hotel. Is that right?
100%. And
Okay.
sometimes and historically the brands managed a lot more, because as they were getting this process going, there wasn't as many third party management companies, or even, owner operators to manage the systems and the brand standards and things that you have to do just to be in the system. Now there's so many of them, and many of them are consolidating because you need real infrastructure and a real bench, if you will. Like, you can't operate a restaurant at a full service hotel in Oklahoma City very well from, South Carolina. You're very reliant on the team that you have on the ground, and if one person goes down and you don't have someone to kind of backfill and supplement them until you find the next person, your operation really suffers. And so what you're seeing is consolidation of the management companies themselves and mergers, so that you really want to go with someone. Either you own or operate it yourself, because no one will operate it as well as you will, but there is a real limit to how many of those you can do with your team. Or you hire a third party that's got, 40 hotels under management, 80, 150, depends on what you're really looking for. Institutional buyers often go with the larger companies because it's just a little bit more accepted in boilerplate. We tend to work with some smaller companies because we feel like we would prefer to have a lot more personnel back and forth. And also, we're not the easiest owner client because we have managed hotels ourselves. So we hold these people probably accountable in a way that is a little different than, a hotel owner that's just doing a hotel for the first time or the second time, that's not really in the operational side. So, each and these third party management companies are oftentimes regionally experts, right? You might hire a company in the Midwest that you wouldn't hire in the Southeast, and vice versa, because they have hotels there, their teams there, their HQ is there. And so that's kind of how it's made up. And then all of them alongside you operate this hotel to a brand standard. And there's quality assurance checks, at least once a year. And at the end of 7 years or 8 years, depending on the brand, you then have to upgrade your whole, not everything, but there are systems that you have to do refreshes every 7 or 8 years to kind of stay in good stead with the brands.
And when you started Mountain Shore, were you 100% doing hotels at that time, and then you expanded out to different asset classes, or
No,
from the beginning were you doing all types?
from the beginning we were doing all types, and I would say that we're more kind of opportunistic on the non-hotel stuff. Like, we are not the world's largest multifamily developer. We find that the people that do other things other than hotels, there's certainly just hotel development companies, but there are a lot of just multifamily, just office, just retail. We can't compete with them at scale and deliver our investors, a return that, is commensurate with the risk they're taking at scale, because we're not set up to do that. But what we can do is find kind of off market opportunities in the cities that we really know well and have a large connection base of brokers and architects and just stuff like that. And oftentimes we learn what's going on in those cities by doing a hotel. And so we have a handful of those cities. Philadelphia, Charleston are one of them. The hotel is a bit more like, you can go to Nashville or Austin or Madison, Wisconsin or Tallahassee and kind of be there for a few days and understand where you would want to do a hotel. It's not that difficult to get that. Now, executing it is a bit more difficult, because if it's a really great, vibrant neighborhood, the cost of land is really expensive and it may be difficult to build there and all of the things. But that often serves as our beachhead, right? So Nashville is a great example. We did a hotel deal. That was the first real estate deal we did in Nashville. We ended up doing an apartment building and we ended up doing an office building. So we kind of learned the market through the hotel deal, and then we understood what pockets we liked, and then we for other assets, so we went and did those. So that's kind of how we look at it. But people probably primarily know us for being a hotel developer, just because it's more interesting to talk about and more fun than just a random apartment building.
Yeah, well, about the other asset classes that you're developing in, how what goes into you thinking about whether you should take on a new project, a non-hotel project, and you're looking at it? How do you think about that and whether you should take the risk to step into something new?
It's a great question, especially today with just it seems like over the last 5 years since COVID started, there has been one obstacle after another to real estate development. It was COVID, and then it was supply chain, and then it was inflation. Now the interest rates are too high, and so one thing after another has made it difficult. I think development is inherently difficult. It's not a simple, easy process, and so that's just part of it. And so when we look to do these projects, they come through our network usually. Again, most of our like we have a real estate fund. That's what we have structured to invest in everything over the last 5 years, and all of the deals in that fund were off market. Like none of them were projects that were quote for sale on listed. It was a connection, and so we would look at it, and then we do a pretty intense underwriting of you know of the deal and whether we think it has enough cushion to go at it. Because ultimately, once you kind of put a budget together, you're going to have change orders, you're going to have contingency, so that has to be built in. And then we want to make sure we're building into an environment that we think there's upside. We never want to build kind of at the top, and of course we all never know where the top is, and it's not like I can time everything perfectly, but you tend to understand what pockets of certain cities are on a rise. And we built in Nashville. We built that hotel from 2018 to 2020, and so we opened during COVID, but actually ended up selling it, somewhat fortunately. But Sobro and that area of Nashville was still, very early days to where it is today. And so that was a place that, we felt like we saw where the city and that sub pocket was headed. And we knew that that project would do really well. And it did. And it has.
And you're developing, I mean, kind of, I don't want to say all over the place. I mean, you have a lot of different places where you're doing developments. One of the things that kind of I think of when doing that is that there might be some challenges related to relationships with the various municipalities that you're developing with, because you're not necessarily living in this city, developing in this city, and you know
Right.
everybody and stuff there. How do you manage those relationships, or are
That's
you?
a great question. That's a great question. Really, it's the local person. So we oftentimes joint venture with a local land developer, and so sometimes they are within that community. There are some places like Philadelphia and Charleston where we do enough stuff that we do know the community, but in these other places we try to find a local partner, and sometimes that local partner is the land partner, and sometimes that local partner is just a broker that has been doing stuff in that city. Like Louisville is a great example. Like we have an amazing guy on the ground there. His name's John Fisher, and he's the one that kind of showed us brokered the deal, but he's kind of stayed on as this local liaison that is able to kind of help us navigate some of these issues that you're talking about that do arise, and that gives us credibility that we're not just trying to drop a bunch of different assets like a monopoly board
Right.
into cities and not care about what that asset's doing in the city and who's being employed and all of that stuff. So that inherently, though, that question often is why we don't do a deal, because we can't feel like we feel like so much like an outsider, and that we don't feel like we're going to be able to get a deal done, and that relationship isn't forged on the early side, so we end up not doing the deal. So it's been a good way of, I think, approaching it. It's not a fast, scalable way of developing. So we're never going to be the company that builds the most stuff. We're going to build less stuff on a slower time that we think is more quality. But when we do these type of deals and kind of spend the time to really integrate ourselves in the city, it often leads to more opportunities within that city. And Louisville's a great example. We did the hotel, but we've also partnered on another project, which is a converted church, historic church that's been now converted into an event space, a bar, and all these other things. So we've and plenty of times have done one deal and then been able to do more, which is kind of what we'd prefer to do. I'd prefer to have two or three deals in these cities that we like because we like the cities, and so that gives us some good scale that way.
And I'm also thinking about when you are partnering with these different development groups, or you joint venture on these projects, and you have your investors as well that are involved in the projects. And it kind of makes me wonder, how do you keep everybody on the same page and kind of keep everybody happy throughout the project? You have a
Yeah.
certain approach you take with keeping everybody in sync?
Yeah, I mean, from the investor standpoint, that's one of the reasons we went to a fund structure as opposed to being like, we're doing a deal in Nashville, we're doing a deal in
Yeah.
Louisville. We went to a fund structure because it was like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do deals in multiple cities and multiple asset classes, and that may make you nervous, and therefore you don't want to invest with us, or you may like that. And the reason that the people have invested with us is because it does give them exposure to an asset class that is, inherently difficult to get exposure to at scale. And we're giving them asset class diversification and geographic diversification. So we're not a company from Charleston, South Carolina, just doing a bunch of projects in Charleston, South Carolina. Which, by the way, if you've done that over the last 30 years, you've done pretty well, given the rise in that market. But we are able to kind of offer that. And again, it's not for everybody, but that also limits the amount of deals that we can do because it requires our development team, which is very small, to be in multiple cities, and you can't do that all at once, so it takes some time. But we think overall, and I think COVID was a great example of, certain cities got really shellacked and certain cities were able to survive it a little bit better. And so having that diversification of your investments was helpful. There's no kind of ifs, ands, or buts about that. It was helpful. And so that's one example, an extreme example, obviously, but it happens all the time. And so, you're looking at your portfolio on balance, and sometimes, August is down here, but very up over there. And that's all we're trying to do, is kind of keep advancing, keep growing, and keep outperforming the prior year. That's the goal.
This episode of the Land Development Podcast is brought to you by Groove. Search parcels, view ownership information, and track conversations with landowners, all in one simple platform. Start your free trial today at letsgroove.com/signup. That's letsgroov.com/signup. All right, let's get back to the show. Yeah. Do you think there's a certain size of, or a certain number of projects that you're doing in order for a fund to make sense for a developer versus the kind of project here, and kind of doing them
Yeah,
separately?
I think if you get to double digits, you kind of need to do it this way. I think otherwise, too, I think it's really, when you're doing a deal by deal raise, usually you're going around with friends and family or whatever. And it's really stinks if you were to like do five, and some, your fourth one was like this like home run. And the others maybe were fine. And then somehow some investor was, on summer vacation and just didn't get back to your subscription email, and then they don't get in. It's just that didn't make sense. And really, COVID is what changed our philosophy on that, right? So COVID happened, and we had just sold that hotel in Nashville, but we still had 7 other hotels, multiple assets, and we were kind of, okay, what do we do here? What do we do here? What do we do here? And it was like, well, sometimes we need to work. These 5 hotels have the same bank, even though they have a slightly different set of investors. So we want to go to that bank and make a deal with them that kind of gives us some breathing room and all of that stuff. But it was like, wow, what if we could get a better deal for this? Am I like being a worse fiduciary to it? It created this conflict that I didn't like. And so coming out of that, I said, like, if we're going to continue to do this stuff, let's go out to everybody that's already in our investor pool and say, hey, you're going to do everything we do or nothing that we do. And I think by and large, that's been a smart move, especially as some of these hotel assets that we did on the heels of COVID have taken longer to ramp up. Other things have gone better. When you kind of spread the risk that way, it provides less pressure to go do a capital call or try to find money.
Yeah. And when you're raising money for a fund, are you raising money with a certain number of projects in mind? Because you must pick out a number and say, hey, we want to raise
Yes.
to this amount, and this will allow us to do these projects. And then when we get to a certain point, we're going to probably talk about a second fund
Second,
or something like
that's
that.
that's exactly right. So when we went out, it was a $75 million fund, and said, this would probably get us 15 to 20 projects, depending. on how many joint ventures we do, and the size of the projects and all of the stuff. And so that's been correct. And some of them are like $500,000 check into a small deal that's kind of like a relationship situation, and then some of them are $15 million checks into a, apartment project in Philadelphia. So it differs, and I think we've learned a lot through Fund One about how we allocate it, how much we want to do. And one of the other things too is interesting is that, like, you do need these joint venture partners, right? Because sometimes there's a joint venture partner that is just a land partner and they're not in real estate. Okay, we're going to have to do all the work. And then there's sometimes, like, our project in Madison is with another real estate company. We're building a hotel there and they do a ton of work. And so we share the responsibility, and it's really great because we're able to work together and we can do things faster and better. And, allows us. Tough part about real estate is, like, usually you spend an inordinate amount of time on the deals that aren't going so well, and,
Right.
and less time on the deals that are going really well. So just kind of how it goes.
Yeah. Do you have a project that over the years that has been your favorite project to work on?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, Camptown. So we built revitalized. We bought the Rip Van Winkle Motor Lodge in the Catskills that was back built in 1925, and we've turned it into a boutique independent hotel that has 26 log cabin, rooms that have been renovated, 24 kind of traditional motel rooms, and then a, award winning restaurant called Casa Susana that the chef it's Mexican, and the chef is family is from Jalisco, and he's been twice nominated for a James Beard. He's incredible. And so that project will probably forever be, just from a stage of my career, what I had done before, what I didn't know, the hardest project we've ever done. We closed on the land February of 20, so right before COVID, and had this delay, and then there was this, like, rush of activity to the Catskills and to upstate New York, and so building anything up there during that time was just like, remember, the lumber was not available. It was just ridiculous, and none of it was winterized. No city sewer or water, and we had to put all the infrastructure in the ground, which was all above ground, and it was on bedrock. And we've got cabins that are 100 years old, trees that are 500 years old that we don't want to disrupt. So doing all of that, I mean, it could have been its own 8-part reality show to everything that's happened there, but it's extremely rewarding to be on the other side of it, to have learned a ton about what to do and what not to do. And then our management team, Ramshackle up there, and the rest of the staff have just brought this place to life. We now have a wedding event area, sauna, pool, and then, of course, the restaurant and a pool bar. And so it's just been really well received. We're now into the third full year of being open, and it's kind of hitting its stride. And just friends and investors, they don't really line up to go to the Hampton Inn in Tallahassee, but many have lined up to go here and stay here and eat here. And just the reviews you get kind of from them of enjoying the property and everything, it's pretty rewarding experience. And it was really extremely difficult. I've said to many people, we've done, I don't know how many development projects, but since I've been around, at least 30, 40, and I spent more time on property there during the construction of that property than all of the other projects combined during the construction of those properties. So it was just a big time labor of love. But learned a lot from it.
Yeah. Well, how does a project like that even come up? Like, how's that even compared to some of the other projects you're talking about and doing and everything? This one feels like, yeah, kind of interesting.
There was a guy that I met on his honeymoon in Greece, and he was a real story. And I started talking to him, and he works, at a different job in New York, and kind of dabbles in the real estate world, and had put this property under contract. It was an existing motor lodge, like I said, and it was operational, but just seasonal. And the restaurant was completely dilapidated and not in use. And he had also identified the business couple that owns and operates what is now called kind of our sister hotel, we're called Rivertown, that had been going on for much longer in Hudson, to be the designers and operators of the place. And so he was just telling me this story that this is this project he's working on. And I said, and he happened to be from Brooklyn as well. And I said, well, I'm in the hotel business. I've been up to Rivertown a bunch. When we get back to the States, let's sit down and have a cup of coffee, and maybe we could work together on this, because I think you're going to need someone that's built hotels to really kind of be at your side on this. And so we did, and we talked for a couple months, and I found ourselves buying a piece of property in February of 20, and then the world shut down, 4 weeks later,
Yeah.
and it was good. I think he would look back on that and say it was a good decision to team up with us, because then we started the fund, and this was one of the first deals in the fund, so we had enough cash to get it going in a time when it was difficult to do it. And so it's a project that probably doesn't get built 90% of the time, but the kind of circumstances and way everything came together, it did. And I think you'll find that a lot with certain hospitality projects. There's just circumstances, relationships that come together that make it so it happens. And, it can create really special places.
So it feels like the lesson there is to you never know where a deal is going to come from. Always be
I mean,
networking.
if you ask my team, they will say that's the truth about me. Maybe I'm always networking too much. But I'm learning to say no more, which is a good thing. But yeah, that's where these relationships happen, and especially hospitality, right? It's that's all about that. That's the thing that needs to go into it to make it special, and then you have to then hopefully get a team of people and train them and teach them and get them to feel the same way about this property that you poured all this energy into, so that the guests can then feel that energy. It's very, very difficult to pull off, and we don't pull it off every day, every night, but you try to pull it off more times than you don't, and that creates a product that people want to come back to.
Yeah. Do you ever bring projects to the team and the teams just they really try to shut them down, and then
Oh
you
yeah.
you you realize that maybe the project you were bringing wasn't as good as you initially thought it was? You ever run into
Oh
that?
yeah, I'm an optimist, so I definitely bring stuff. Even though I said I've learned to say no more, my dad says no pretty much every time, first time, and so like you're always trying to convince him to a yes if you believe in it. But I think that's good. It's a healthy discourse. I think every development team needs someone that's a bit more of a dreamer. And then you've got, I'm very good with numbers, but I'm not as good as Ryan is, or my dad, who's been a CPA for 50 years. But so, I think that leads to healthy discourse. And we've certainly done deals that we probably wish we didn't, but we've also not done deals that we probably should have done. And so, that's just the way it is. You got to kind of put that aside and understand that you're going to make some mistakes. And if you do the deals you do and do them well, and you do them for the right reasons and do them on a long-term view, you should be fine.
Well, we're at 32 minutes here, so I'd like to shift into the last segment here, which is a lightning round. So I've got 5 questions for you, and just get your thoughts on these things, and
Perfect.
then we come to a close. So first one here, what was, and you might have talked about this already, but what was the first deal that you ever worked on?
So that was the deal in Philly. We
Okay.
did
Uh,
16. It was a existing apartment building, 3 units. The retail on the ground was vacant, and then the back of the lot, it was a street to street lot, was a parking lot. So we subdivided the lot and built a townhome in the back. Sold the townhome, rented the 3 apartments, and then got this amazing pie shop to take the retail lease on. And actually, when we were done after a year, I went to the owner of the pie shop and said, "Hey, you deserve to own the building. Let's make a deal so that you can own it. You're in the bottom of it. We've already sold the house." And we ended up selling it to her and her husband. And I think they owned and operated that for about 8 or 9 years. So it
that's
was a
cool.
good, small first deal, but super successful. And probably, if that one had gone the wrong way, we might not be talking today. But it went the right way, and that I was off and running.
All right, second one here. What's one habit or routine that kind of helps you head in the right direction? Keep you head in the right direction.
I think listening to the teammates that we have, and I think being aware that I don't know a lot still, and taking the feedback from others, and trying to incorporate that, while at the same time maintaining the internal conviction that, hey, if you believe this is good, and like you guys are doing this, you got to keep your head down, and keep working hard, because a lot of these projects, you don't have success overnight, and so many examples of entrepreneurs, business people in this world who fought through the messy middle to get to the other side.
All right, third one. What's a mistake you made early on that still sticks with you?
When we first started, call it 2011, 2015, and we found early success, not doing more in when there's early success, right? And kind of hedging your bets because like, oh, let's see how this goes. And once it goes well, I think when you have conviction and then you do something great, I think you need to do more within that space, because the market usually gets oversaturated, by the time you've waited. And so I think that would be a lesson that sticks with me to this day, is just like there's a lot of stuff we left on the table in areas where we probably could have done more.
All right, fourth one. If you weren't in development or the legal field, what career would you be in?
Well, I was hoping to be, a general manager of a sports team. So that was the path I wanted to go to the legal for. So I guess I would say that, although I got to kind of experience that at the beginning and realize, man, only like 32 people get to be general managers of
Yeah.
football teams. So I probably need to go do something else because it's a long shot to get here.
All right, last one. What's one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self just starting out in real estate development?
To be patient and to always be patient, whether it's to get into a deal while you're in the deal, understand that these things take time and that the results aren't always immediate, and to always kind of maintain conviction, but patience.
Cool. Well, what's the best way for everybody listening in to connect with you and learn more
Yeah,
about
sure.
Mountain Shore?
Yeah, it's the website's www.mountainshoreproperties.com. Also, our Instagram handle at Mountain Shore Properties, and you can hit me up, Stephen Wendell, on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. So, all of you listening in right now, if you look down in the show notes for this episode, in the description will be a link there, and you will see all of the links just mentioned, and you can connect with Stephen and learn more about Mountain Shore. Stephen, really appreciate you hopping on here and sharing quite a bit. We got into some topics we've never covered before on here, so super
That's great.
interesting. Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
you bet. All right, guys, that's all for this episode. We will talk to you all next week.